lights go dim. It's time to find out what's within. Behind the camera, there's so much more. With AndyGames, let's explore. Behind the camera with AndyGames. Meet the streamers, learn their names. Off the screen, who are they? Tune in now, don't delay.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera with AndyGames. This is the podcast where I interview people from the world of content creation and beyond with the sole purpose of getting to know the person a little bit better behind the camera. In this episode, I sat down with Australian filmmaker Michael Papaeleftheriou, where we discussed his journey as a filmmaker, his latest project Crossroads, and how that compares to his previous projects, and much more. Here is the interview. Michael, thank you for taking the time to appear on Behind the Camera with AndyGames. How are we doing today?
No, I'm great, Andy. Thanks for having me.
No, of course, absolutely. Looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better and about your journey and your current endeavors, everything like that. So let's just get into it. So take us back to the very beginning. Obviously, you being a filmmaker, how did you get into this? How did you know that this was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, sort of happened by coincidence or maybe fate. I don't really know. But it was literally like the last day of school. Like I just finished my last exam, and like I forced my mum to like take me to Blockbuster and like rent some DVDs, and I had all this extra time because no more exams. So I started just binging the special features, the behind the scenes, and like I was like, after that week, before I handed the DVDs back, I was like, this is what I actually want to do. Yeah.
How good a time was that to be alive, though? Like, you know, looking back to like the time of Blockbusters and just literally like, you know, you finish school on a Friday and it's just like Blockbusters, Dominoes, you know, movies, everything. It's just brilliant. It was just such a great time to be alive. So what sort of like movies then were your like bread and butter at the time? Like what were you into? What was your jam in terms of that?
What was my jam? I don't know. I gotta say, probably had like a pretty basic taste in films back then. But I like one of those films that I rented was a film by Kevin Smith, and I realized that he had put like two characters in this movie that were in another movie. And I was like,
yeah, of course, yeah.
What? You're not allowed to do that. Like, and then it hit me. I was like, wait, if he's allowed to do that, then I'm allowed to make movies. These guys look like they're having fun. And that just like, then I really got into like that wave that came out in the 90s of all those indie filmmakers and their sort of stories that really like were almost as like captivating as their films themselves, like the stories of them becoming filmmakers. Yeah.
Yeah, that you know, I love that as an inspiration because Kevin Smith as a filmmaker is just incredible. Like with this like little universe that he has, like almost like centralized around Jay and Silent Bob, which I assume is the two characters that you were talking about. Yeah, like, and the fact that whole series started like with Clerks in 1994, and it's still to this day sporadically like a new film will come out with the same characters in it. Like like incredible. And like even going back to your point about like just the special features and deleted scenes in DVDs, like I almost feel like that's a complete dying art right now because everything's so digital. It's less interactive in its own way. Like obviously it's more accessible, but I mean, you look back to like, I suppose up to 20-25 years ago at this point, you don't, that was just such a great thing. You sit down, watch the DVD, special features, and you had like a plethora of things. And now you don't really get that anymore. Like, so as a filmmaker, with your like project, say you were to like sort of have a project to like, say we want to release a DVD, like a feature length film, like, you know, do you feel like the special features is kind of a lost art at this point?
Oh, 100%. And it's sort of ironic, like you use the word interactive as we use all this like new technology to like stream movies and TV shows. But like a DVD was like so much more interactive than the experience you get like streaming. And maybe it's because they had to sell the DVD, like maybe it was little bit harder. So they put a bit more effort into it with like all that stuff. I feel like we're gonna miss like a whole generation of like would-be filmmakers that would have been inspired by all those behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if I don't think they make them anymore.
Yeah, of course. Which is kind of like insane because you look at like Netflix. Netflix was a DVD postal service before it was
Yeah.
a streaming service. But then as well, like, you know, with the would-be filmmakers, as you say, it's interesting because even people's like mobile phones these days, they can record high quality footage of things. And if you want to kind of like be a filmmaker and kind of keep above the sort of short form content, YouTube content kind of like quality of filming, you know, you kind of need to sort of put more of an investment into like higher quality equipment. And that's just not like accessible to everybody. I think it's just one of those things about this sort of digital age where everything's so accessible that it does kind of take away from the art form that is kind of cinema.
You know, I think it actually like I totally get what you're saying, and I totally agree. I think something that goes unsaid is you know, it is so much more accessible, and it gives a lot more people the opportunity to um I guess lie to themselves
Mm-hmm.
that they want to do it
Yeah.
because it's so easy. The amount of times that I've heard someone say, "Oh, like it's so easy, Michael. We can just do X, Y, Z," and like I used to get like really sort of frustrated because I could sort of understand like where that conversation was going to lead to, which was going to be just like we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like I know that you think it's easy, but like we're not actually doing anything. But I've learned to just like sort of play it off as like, okay, Michael, like let's be a bit more diplomatic, and I'll be like, all right, it is easy. I agree with you. Let's do it. First step is like, I need you to do this, and I never hear back from those people. Um, so yeah, it's a lot more accessible, but you know, is it really? I don't know. It's sort of like for me, I think it's become more of a hurdle
Yeah.
because now there's all these people that you have to like sort of filter to actually get to the people that you're going to end up working with, if that makes sense.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Like I certainly think with the accessibility of everything, it's almost kind of raised the bar in terms of the sort of quality of content you need to put out as a filmmaker, because obviously, you know, in your case specifically as a filmmaker, you have to like reach out to actors. You put out the casting calls and stuff, and then obviously they have to review your work to see. It's like a two-way street, of course, but in this day and age, like, more people are probably doing that, and that probably in turn leads to sort of more actors turning down work because it's just like, okay, it's another, you know, YouTuber who thinks they're a filmmaker kind of thing. And so tell us about then the sort of casting process that, you know, from your experience, like how do you sell yourself to the actors that you want to work with?
You know what? You're right on the money, and like you know, I was lucky enough to get like two very brilliant actors for my short, and they echoed a lot of what you just said, which is like you know the frustration of like having your time wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of develop a sixth sense for having your time wasted, but um like to counteract your point, like the way that you get good talent on board is you just like show your commitment.
Yeah.
So I mean, number one is just like having like a little bit of extra money to just like put yourself up, like you don't have to like you know take out a loan or anything, but like just having a little bit more money than what you'd want to pay
Yeah.
is gonna just filter like all the people. You're gonna get so many good applicants. That's gonna make your life easy. And the other thing was, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but like I had a pretty decent script. And I can say that because in the year prior to really in the year and a half prior to this film, like I literally just all I did was write.
Yeah.
Like that was it. And I got better, and the actors like saw it. Yeah.
No, brilliant. So tell us then a little bit about Crossroads. Crossroads being your latest project, of course, your latest short. Tell us a little bit about that, like the synopsis and how you came about with the idea.
So the synopsis is now let's go into how I came up with the idea first.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
I So I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and I've moved to Spain to live with my partner. And my plan was like I'm gonna practice my writing in Spain and then like go back to Sydney and like make a short film or like make 3 short films.
Yep.
So I go back to Sydney and I've got like essentially 3 scripts ready to go, and I'm just realizing like to do this properly, because this was a big step up for me. Like the budget was like 15 times more than anything I had directed before. So I just quickly realized like to do something properly and like not have it be a risk is actually super hard. So those 3 scripts I had, I threw them in the bin, and I literally just thought of like the most simple possible thing that I could shoot, which is like single location, 2 good actors, and just let them tear the scene up. And honestly, I think just from practicing my writing over and over again, like giving myself some limitations to be like, it's one location. I just finished writing a crime drama TV pilot, so let's put it in the crime genre, and then from there, it's like it all just came together. And the synopsis is essentially there's this like new age forensics expert, sort of like a legal professional, who essentially when you invent like and you just try to put yourself in the shoes of like the person that discovered DNA and like trying to explain DNA to other people. So that's where this legal expert is at, and their career is not going so well because it's just like, how do I explain this new concept? So they've dedicated their life to essentially pioneering this form of evidence, but that comes with your career potentially being a bit rocky. So she arrives home one day, she finds criminals at her house, and they want her to they want to buy her. And then it's just like this philosophical dialogue at gunpoint between the mobster and the legal expert.
Okay, brilliant. That does sound incredible. Like I can't wait to see it. So how then did, in terms of the filming process for Crossroads, how did that compare to the previous projects that you've worked on, like directed, produced, etc.?
So the first thing, so everything that I've produced has always like I've just always gone in with like a very open mind. Like I'm ready to suffer and like learn, because again, just like indie film is just so rife with error, which is it's totally fine. It's part of it. So I've dealt with like a lot of things such as like poor sound, like members of the public coming and like being annoying. Basically, just like I realized that there's like the more variables there are in the outside world, the more chances of disruption there are. And for example, my first short, I spent $1,000 on it, and like it was very disrupted. But at the end of the day, the worst thing that was going to happen is like I just lose $1,000.
Yeah, of course.
So for this one, where I was like, I want to pull out all the stops, having it in one location, an isolated location, shooting at night, that all played into like me just like trying to eliminate variables that could potentially disrupt this, because essentially if we couldn't get it on that weekend, we're never going to get it, because you pay people, you pay locations, like once that money's gone, like I don't have money to pay people again, sort of thing. So that really influenced the short. And again, talking about those limitations, like the story was sort of influenced by like what I could get away with.
Yeah, of course. So then as a director, obviously you have a vision in your head of how you see this playing out, going from paper to in real life being acted out. Whenever you're like, whenever you're doing takes, whenever you're watching this being acted out, how much changes in terms of your creative vision? Like, is it a case where you're watching the actors play out the scene and you're like, okay, in theory it sounded good, but this is actually not what I want, let's change it up a bit? Like, is there a lot of kind of changing on the fly whenever you are directing something?
there's more or less like zero changing on the fly. Not because like, okay, so that's I'm gonna have to really get deep with this question.
No, of course. Please do. Please do.
So on set, there is like essentially zero changing on the fly. Like if a happy accident happens, like again, like I try to eliminate variables so that we can have happy accidents.
Yeah.
Because when you are running against the clock, you don't have time for happy accidents. And like that's where the magic is. Like that's where like those films that you love, where the magic happens, it's because they had like the stuff that they could take care of, they could, and they did, and then like, you know, something will happen on set and they'll just run with that.
Yeah.
So on set there wasn't much room for like budging. And because of that, like when something did occur, it was like, oh, let's go for that.
Okay.
But the way that I saw this project was like, you know, I'm working with really good people and we've got like money and time, so I should like defer some of the process to them. And with the actors in particular, like my main job was just explaining to them the vision and explaining to them the story and their characters. After that, they really just took the reins and went for it. And everything that they did was like amazing. So it was more in terms of like making sure that they understood what I saw.
Yeah.
And then once they understood what I saw, like whatever direction they go in, well, like that's their sort of spin on it. And I'm totally okay with that. Like I don't want to puppeteer them. I just want to like talk to them and like make sure that we're on the same page. And then after that, it's like if they say, "Oh, but Michael, I think we should do this," well, like it's sort of like that's coming from me as well. Like we've collaborated to get to that. So once they say that, it's like, well, I'm just going to say, okay, like let's do it, because you know what's in my head, and we've like I've done all the job of communicating to you. Anything you have to say is like it's going to be a positive, so let's try it at least.
Okay, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I obviously I'm not in the film industry myself, so I wouldn't really have much idea. But it's interesting that it does become a two-way street like that. And would you say that that's more prevalent in indie filmmaking, or do you think that that would kind of like go up right to sort of like A-list Hollywood sort of level as well?
I would say that's prevalent wherever you have time to do rehearsals, because all the fiddling around was done in rehearsals, and we spent hours rehearsing.
Okay.
Because like when you're shooting, like I don't want to say, oh, hey, like I don't like the way that you did this little thing. Like for me, that's like a big waste of everyone's time. You know what I mean? Like in the moment, I just want to say, hey, remember when we were doing rehearsals and you did that thing? And then they're like, oh yeah, no worries, Michael. Like I'm just there to just, you know, just like give people a little push on the day. Like my job should essentially be done by the time the day comes. Yeah.
Okay, so it's really just a case where there's no room for anything to look back in like retrospect and think, okay, I wish we'd done this differently, sort of thing. It's just perfection on the day, because well, I mean, as you say, like they're acting out your vision, and if they have notes, it's based on sort of their ability and any limitations. Then, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like if they have notes, it's coming from like a place that we've discussed. It's not just like something on the fly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
that's incredibly interesting. I love the fact that it just has to be a well-oiled machine, because obviously at the end of the day, you know, you're the one who's putting in this sort of time investment to do all this. The actors, obviously, as much as back and forth with yourself as there is, they're the ones getting paid at the end of the day. First off, aren't they? They're doing the job for you, and then that's kind of, you know, the reward for you comes after.
You know, like I've been on a lot of sets where it certainly felt that way, but I really have to hand it to Shane and Leanne. Like they really took ownership of this film, of this story, and like for me that was a first. Like I've never worked with like such great actors before. And again, like, you know, this is just what happens when you have a bit more money to like show, like, hey, like I'm taking this seriously. Like serious people, like good people jump on board. And you know, I think purely because like they just were so invested, that's where all that good fortune came from. So really, like, you know, as much as it is quote unquote my vision, like honestly, like I really do give them like heaps of props. Yeah, it is a collaboration.
Oh, for sure. Like, because at the end of the day, you're relying on, like, well, essentially these trained professionals to sort of act it out in the way that you are seeing it, really, isn't it? Sorry, go on.
I mean,
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
very open. I'm very open as long as like they know what my intent is and like what their character's intent
Mhm.
is, then like they're free to bring whatever it is to the table, if that
Yeah.
makes
Oh,
sense.
of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. So, in terms of Crossroads versus your previous projects that you've directed, like, would the main difference then be the budget that you've put into Crossroads, or is it just, was there a bit more passion behind Crossroads in comparison? Like, what's the sort of like the journey been like in terms of like the projects you've worked on leading up to
Uh,
Crossroads?
Definitely the budget is one. I think the other thing is just like writing and yeah, the way that like those two things marry themselves is really interesting because like my second short, I like there's no dialogue in it.
Mm.
And the reason there's no dialogue in it is because like I just didn't want like I conceptualized something where we didn't have to worry about sound.
Yep.
Um and because of that, it's like, well, we don't really need like a great actor. So it's like, we sort of like I just got my friend to play the guy in that film. Um and yeah, like because we had like a lot more sort of eggs in the basket, more magic happened, I guess. And the more you invest, the more you want to keep investing because it's like, well, I've already come this far and I've
Yep.
already put all this into it, so I might as well just go more. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, in terms of Crossroads, then, in and the writing process compared to the others, do you sort of take aspects of like, this is what I've learned from making my previous projects, and you kind of like put those learnings into your next script or your next screenplay, for example? Like, would that would that probably be fair to say, or do you just kind of
Y-
go off like your vision of what you want at the time?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I think with my previous projects that I directed, I think I felt like more like a producer than a director.
Mm-hmm.
Like my job was foremost just to like to make sure it was done.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas this time I felt like, again, probably because we had the money, it's like, well, if I'm paying you, then you're invested and you know it's serious. So it's like now you sort of want to take time, like not just when we're shooting to do the film, but you want to take time like in your everyday life to like message me, send me voice messages, do video calls, do rehearsals. So I think a lot of people saw this as sort of something that they could, put on their reel, their
Yeah.
portfolio. Um, and because of that, everyone sort of just like lifted their game up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, that's, yeah. Like, I think, when it comes to actors, of course, their portfolio is everything. No matter sort of the size of the project they've worked on, it's still something that they've worked on. And I definitely kind of think it's testament to that. Like, actors are essentially kind of what make, like, in a sense, they are what make a movie what it is. So obviously, when you look at like sort of the review side of things, you do have certain projects that are like, it was well written but poorly executed, and even sort of vice versa as well. Because I can tell you, like, a good, very good friend of mine, he sort of tried his hand at indie filmmaking for the longest time, and he enlisted in me to sort of play the lead role in one of his films, and I was like, okay, this is a terrible idea right from the get-go, but I'm always willing to help a friend out. And but it was one of those ones. It was a good story, but I can't act
Mhm.
to save my life. So the story was like, where I live and where he used to live. It's right at the foot of a mountain range, and the whole idea was like this man and his girlfriend are going on a hike. He's all reserved and she's all happy-go-lucky, very excited. And at the very end of the film, we get to the top of the mountain, and the whole mood changes, and it turns out that he was going up to spread her ashes because she died in a car accident, and that's when like the big reveal is, and then she just like
Yep.
disappears with the ashes and all. And I think it was like a really well written story, and I was like the male lead in it. Why, I don't know. And then God love him, because like the lead, the female lead was a drama student in university at the time, and like she was like kind of thinking, I can put this on like my portfolio here. And then obviously I kind of messed that up, and then all kinds of sound issues and everything. And then going forward, like his like one of his like sort of future projects after that is he did go the route of hiring professional actors. Um, and again, it was like I don't think this particular story was like as well written, but the scenes that got filmed that night made it really really good, because of the difference of professional actors making a sort of not badly written, but kind of a sort of, sub like an okay story, but like they made it really good in comparison to a good story getting ruined by like your mate from down the street, like,
It's so hard. Like, did he write that character at all with you in mind? Or did he wrote something separate and then was like, oh, I think Andy can play this character?
I think it was the latter. Yeah, I think he had it all written, and it could have been absolutely anybody. But he decided to choose me. I think it might have been like a convenience thing. But I think at the same time for him, it was probably just a case of he wanted to just get something out there and just have something, which is probably not the best way to go about it, really, because I mean, kind of bear in mind this was about 12 or 13 years ago, so it was a little bit different back then, because obviously now, as we touched on before, anybody can put anything out there, and whether it's going to be good is a whole other thing. It's like kind of this day and age, it's like throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks, really, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like to your friend's credit, like I mean, I haven't seen the films or anything, so I won't like I don't want to comment on that. But it's just like you've got to do something.
Yeah,
You've absolutely got to do something. And if I could go back and do it all again, I would just aim very low, um, because conceptually, like Crossroads is the simplest thing I've done. Like
mm,
there's nothing that fancy about it.
yeah,
Um, if I'm sitting like there's no, like the way that you describe that short, there's sort of like a catch to it,
yeah,
it's like she was dead all along sort of thing. Um, Crossroads doesn't have any of that.
yeah,
Um, but what I wanted to do was I just wanted to do the most simple, basic stuff, but at the highest level that I could. Um, and when you start out, like I think if I could go back, I would do more simple stuff and like less of what your friend did.
yeah.
Because yeah, I've been down that road as well. And it's like, why are we trying to do like this hard thing when like at the end of the day, like we should just learn how to shoot two people talking.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, absolutely. And that is where like the actors come into it. You can have a simple idea and it could be made a hell of a lot better than what it actually is. And like I kind of think that simplicity is just such a wonderful thing when it comes to movies. Like it's just I think movies these days, it's like either people talk too much or not enough. There's no real kind of fine balance. And obviously indie filmmaking would like is probably the sort of hardest level of filmmaking to churn out something good quality that is gonna kind of like shoot you up into those heights, like where you may want to go. Like I'm sure it probably is a sort of like it was high risk high reward, really, isn't it?
oh, 100%. 100, like you have to be like some sort of stupid to do this, which I totally am.
No, I'm sure you wouldn't change anything about it though, like up to
No.
date, because like of course it's a learning process, like every single project, isn't it?
100%. And like to go back to what we were talking about like before with like accessibility, like the only reason I do this is because like I don't really feel like I have a choice.
Hmm.
Like, it's not some like fad or something. Like I'm just compelled to do this. Um, yeah, I think that's what you need.
No, of course. Like I do feel like sometimes when you are in that position, it kind of gives you a little bit more drive, and especially when you have that kind of creative background, having like watched like so many movies when you were younger, like it's it's such like an infinite thing, because you can never run out of ideas. You can always have You could always have like, do you stick to one genre? Do you do different genres? Do you typecast yourself in a certain way, or do you just go with your creative flow at the time? Like, I think that's kind of like something that's kind of lost in it these days. I do, like, I know other people here and they're like, I want to be a horror filmmaker and solely a horror filmmaker, and now they do weddings. Like, it's like, well, why didn't you try writing something else? It's like, well, because I don't want to do that. Like, to go back to your point where you say you do this because you feel like you have to, do you feel like you could write any single genre that you wanted, or is it just a creative flow, like it just, and see what kind of genre kind of comes out of what you've written down on a page, if that makes sense?
That's absolutely, that's a really great question. I do feel like I can, weave in and out of genre, like, for sure, and I definitely want to do that. But as I get further and further into the writing rabbit hole, um, it's almost sort of like you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot by doing that like too early.
Yeah.
Like, basically what you want is you want to have like two hits in succession, because everyone, like, anyone can have one hit, but if you have a second hit, like, now everyone really like knows you're legit.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to like do whatever you want. But yeah, with writing, for example, like, if you write something, and it's so hard to be like a professional screenwriter, like, it's so hard to break into that industry. But if you break in and you get an agent, and like your first script is like amazing, and then you give them a second script and it's a different genre, they're gonna just like,
Yeah.
like, you can't do that. Like, we need two hits. Like, I know that you made it, but you haven't actually made it. Like, you've got your foot in the door, but you need to get through the door.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you really have to, you got to prove yourself so that you get the opportunity to prove yourself for real. Yeah, but I would love to do like all sorts of genres. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So at this moment in time, what would you say that your genre to get you through the door would be? Would it be like a sort of thriller type?
Yeah, and to get a bit more niche, probably crime.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. Like, I think that's a good niche to have, especially early on, because this could be me coming from a place of ignorance almost, but for me, it feels like there are less crime movies now and more crime TV shows. And I don't know if that's like an attention span thing with people. People would almost rather going off the whole short form content of today. People would almost rather want to watch something that's maybe 20 minutes long versus like even a short film. Like I kind of feel like it's more TV shows. And what's your opinion on, like, obviously these things do come in stages, but like, what's your opinion on going into like TV show writing? I know you mentioned you have done a TV pilot before. What, like, sort of, in terms of filmmaking, is it just you want to go into like movies, or is it TV, or is it just a love of writing and seeing kind of where that goes?
I think I want to do movies. The reason that I wrote a pilot is because every filmmaker falls into this very stupid trap. And like, again, you don't know this stuff until you start doing it, and then you really start to understand. But like, as a filmmaker, you write something so that you can make it.
Yeah.
And when you start to write something to improve your writing, you always go back, you find yourself going back to this sort of embodiment of a filmmaker. And when you write something to make it, there's all these other factors at play that really prevent you from actually becoming a good writer. So because I knew that there was zero chance of me ever doing like a TV series like anytime soon, I wrote a TV pilot because that was the only way that I could eliminate that voice and eliminate that perspective. Now that I've like gotten over that hurdle and like I understand what like half decent writing is, I feel I can start like leaning more towards movies. Yeah.
Oh, of course. That's a good way. I think that's brilliant, because at least now, having written something, you're like, No, maybe not, at least right now anyway. So then just to go back to your point then about having two hits to get through the door, one to get your foot in the door, one to get through the door, which I absolutely love that analogy, by the way. Um, do you have like certain projects that are like on the shelf ready for that, or is it very much a kind of you might have so many different concepts, but you have one thing that you're working on at like any given time?
Great question. You want to always have something else. Like you don't ever want to like tell someone, "Oh, hey, check out this script," without having like another script. Because if they like the first thing whenever you go to sell a script, I don't know why. I don't know why this is. I've heard this story so many times. It infuriates me. But whenever you go to sell a script and you have a really good script and they want your script, the first thing they're going to tell you is, "Have you written anything else?"
Mm.
So you have to have it ready because you cannot cook something that good on the fly. You just cannot.
Yeah. So like, so essentially, like, if you're anyone you're trying to sell your script to, like any production company, they are essentially expecting that second one, that second hit, basically as well. So they're kind of got like the sort of foresight for that too, is what you're saying.
I think what it is, it's like I don't think gatekeeping is the right word, but let's go with gatekeeping. It's just a great way to filter out like people that might not fit the bill. Because as
Yeah,
soon
of
as they
course.
say, "Oh, I actually don't have another script," it's like, bang, you're not good enough. Like there's someone that does have another script. And
Yeah.
like maybe we don't want to read that script, but the fact that they have another script means they're more committed than this guy.
Yeah, of course. So ultimately, like production companies would want to work with somebody with for a multiple sort of movie basis rather than just a one and done, because I'm sure that probably then comes across as like they look like a charity case at that point, really, wouldn't they?
No, generally what people want is to hire you to write the movie that they want to make the movie
Okay.
that's going to like get their investment back.
Yeah.
Typically, I want to say about like 10 spec scripts are like sold in Hollywood every year. And when I say spec script, I mean like, if I just wrote something from my brain and then gave it to them for their consideration, they would
Yeah, of
buy it.
course.
What studios want to do is they want to say, "Hey, this is the type of film we're good at making. Your spec script is of that genre, but like your spec script needs like a budget that we don't have. It's an ensemble, and we sort of just want to focus on like a few actors that can like sell the movie." So their goal is to make their investment back. And if your script is like that good, or if your script is like coincidentally of what they're looking for, then maybe it can get made. But ultimately, what a studio wants is to hire you to write their film.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Makes sense though as well. Kind of with the in recent years, especially with the quality of blockbuster or so-called movies anyway as well. It seems to
Yeah,
have kind of taken a bit of a dive, especially whenever I see the name Kevin Hart in a movie and kind of know it's gonna not be
God,
amazing.
I feel so bad because like that my least favorite thing about Spain is like, well, at least the area that I live in is there's just no English cinemas. So I've seen like 2 movies in the last like 2 years
Oh
at
wow.
the cinemas. Like yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, of course, because obviously being a filmmaker, like it's your passion, it's your hobby, and of course you not only would want to, but you need to see what's kind of out there as well, just because that's kind of feeds the passion, really. But it's crazy. And like, I mean, what's your Spanish like? Having lived
I
there,
I can get by, but
yeah.
like it's it's like I'll respond to someone in Spanish and they'll be like, "Oh, you speak Spanish, let's talk." And then it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like I just have the basic phrases. Like let's not get into philosophy here.
Yeah, like every time I hear like anybody say anything similar, it just reminds me of Pulp Fiction. Bruce Willis just "Donde está la zapateria?"
No, yeah, yeah.
Just where's the shoe store? It's like, because who says that on a regular basis whenever you're in Spain? But anyway,
Yeah.
so what can we expect from you in the future in terms of your future projects? Do you have anything that is ready to go? Well, not ready to go, but anything that is like further along as a follow up to Crossroads? Like, what's the next project that you're kind of got more sight on at the moment?
Yeah, it's another really good question. I wish I had a great answer,
No,
but
of
I have
course.
a decent answer. Um, you know, so with this film, like I've had like a journal on Instagram where I sort of like, just I've been documenting the process from start to finish. And the reason I've done that is because um, when you start to transition to these bigger like budget productions, you start to encounter all these like roadblocks that no one ever like really talks about.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, have you seen Rogue One, like the Star
I
Wars movie?
haven't, but I obviously know it, but I haven't seen it.
There's this part that just sticks out to me. I think about it very often. The guy's like, someone's like, they're doing something stupid, and they're like, "What's the plan?" And he's like, "The plan is we're gonna do this, and then after we do this, we'll get some new information, and then based on that new information, we'll know what to do next."
Hmm.
That's what I'm doing right now, and that's why I feel compelled to like share the process, because it took me like a lot of like time and effort
Yeah.
to get to this position, but like I have only a very vague idea of what's next.
Yeah.
Like I know of certain avenues where I can get funding if I do get accepted to a film festival. I know of avenues to get funding, but like even after I start to get funding, it's like that's just like one door that will lead to many other doors.
Yeah.
And honestly, like that, I sort of started from the outside in. Like the goal for me with this project was like to learn about all these doors and to just like see what the best thing I could do was. So I'm looking to answer that question with this project because I don't really know what's possible next,
No, of
but I'm eager to
course.
learn.
Yeah, of course. And like as we've touched on, of course, it's like a ever changing sort of industry in terms of like thought process and trends and what people are kind of into at this out of time. So just on that, and whenever you're conceptualizing a new project, like, do you have to essentially think, okay, I want this to be a short film, I want this to be a feature? Do you have to have that in mind at the very least before you go onto it? Or is there ever a possibility where you can sort of have an idea for a feature and it turn into a short, or vice versa?
There's almost zero chance of that second one happening.
Okay.
Like the only way that would happen is if like you gave like the script to someone else that was like really good, or you were talking about it to someone else, like someone in your circle, and they were like, "Hey man, like that sounds really good, but like think about it from this avenue." And
Okay.
then either you're gonna say like, "No way," or "Holy, like wow, you've just unlocked my brain." Like, yeah, absolutely. Um, Generally, you want to be very conscious with what you're doing, because it is quite hard.
Yeah, of course. No, fair, fair. So okay, so next I want to give you the chance to plug yourself here. Um, so I want to talk about your podcast, Paths We Took.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this and where that came from, what the sort of general idea of it is, and where we can find it.
Yeah, I really just like fell in love with podcasting. I want to say like five or so years ago, and I was just
Mhm.
like, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna get my own podcast because I've got all this free time, and like I
Yeah.
love talking to people, and it'll be a great excuse to like just hang out with some cool people. Um, and I started doing that. I like talk to some of my friends like casually, talking about like their jobs and what they do. And then like I moved to Spain, and the podcast really became like um I've had so many jobs in my life. So essentially what we do now is like every episode, like if I'm not talking to like a guest, every episode, me and my partner will just like discuss like one of my jobs and like what I learned at that job. And like it's almost like therapy. Like, yeah. So that's what it is. I've just got like literally all the jobs you could think of. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I
Yeah.
love that, like, because I'm not a, I think what you've touched on some incredible points there, because um when it does come to things like podcasting, you do just have to say, I'm going to go for this, because what do you have to lose apart from a little slice of your free time, right? If, you know,
100%.
if it doesn't take off or you have a bad episode or anything like that, you know, you might have lost a couple of hours, but it doesn't matter because you're still doing it. And that's definitely one step ahead of people who are still thinking about doing it. And that's the same with, obviously, you know, your filmmaking too. You're doing it, but a lot of people are still dreaming about it. And I love the concept of that because every single person has their own story to tell. Like you say, if you're not interviewing guests, you're talking about the jobs you've had, and like that obviously fits in incredibly into the name paths we took, because you've been on multiple different paths and all kind of converging into your current path as a filmmaker. I think that's an absolutely incredible sort of thing to do. Like, and I think it's something that is absolutely slept on in terms of the mainstream, is getting to learn people's stories. And like, you know, it's a similar like to the conversation that we're having right now. We're just having a chat, learning new things, about interesting topics, and it's great. I genuinely am like a firm believer of things like that. So where can we find Paths We Took?
It's it's on a lot of like podcasting platforms. I've sort of lost track of which ones. But basically, if you go to, you know, if you just go to the Instagram Paths We Took, like there'll be a link there. Or if you go to Crossroads Film Journal at Instagram, there's like a whole link tree of like everything. Like, yeah.
There you go, folks. There you have it. That is where you can find Paths We Took podcast, and I definitely would urge you to check it out, as I know I will be 100% as well. Michael, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera today. I've been covered some amazing topics. It has been so good to learn about your journey, your filmmaking, everything. Crossroads, where can we find that? Where would that be available to view?
I would hope that I mean, again, it's such a long process, but I would hope that in about a year's time it will be available online. Yeah. But
Perfect.
again, the whole thing with film festivals is like it's a secret. It's a secret until we show it.
Of course. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for Crossroads. Although there is a trailer for it on your website. I'm correct in saying that, right?
Yeah.
So definitely check that out. Yeah, as I say, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to appear on Behind the Camera. It's been brilliant. I honestly do appreciate you getting to share your story, and honestly, I wish you all the best in the future.
Many thanks, Andy. The pleasure's all mine. It's genuinely been a pleasure to talk to you, of course. And like, I've listened to some episodes and you're a great interviewer. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you saying that. It's very kind of you. Yeah. Cheers. And there you have it. That was my conversation with Australian filmmaker Michael Papaeleftheriou. Honestly, an incredible conversation with such an intriguing man. It was so good to get such a great insight into the world of filmmaking and amateur filmmaking, and really the process that goes into it. Honestly, I really do wish Michael all the best in his future endeavors. As always, this has been Behind the Camera with AndyGames. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We will be back again very soon with another installment of Behind the Camera with AndyGames. But until then, peace.